to finish at 12, that's right, I turned you off. At 12:35, I'm going to set this in just a moment to set an alarm in just a moment. I've got a bookmark in here that told me that we got up the other day, and I could not believe it was right, or that we were going to pick up today around chapter 27. Does anybody know if that's right? That should be right?
It shouldn't.
Should not, okay. Because I thought it would, we didn't get that far.
No, I don't think we did.
Yeah.
We're in the teens.
Yeah, 15, okay. So we have got to, not stopwatch, timer. Because we have got to try and finish this today, because the other two books don't get any shorter. So, chapter 15, Man Called Dictionary. Okay. If you remember how the story begins, George is thinking what? What? How do I put this well? George never spent any time wondering why he wanted to belong. He thought, this is what life's like, keeping your head below the parapet so you wouldn't get hit. Okay? He just wants to be alone, kind of. Right? But then we get told by the gunner, that George can't have that kind of life. He's got to face facts, as they were. And what are the facts thus far that we know that George has got to face?
One, his dad's not going to be around. He's just not there.
One, yeah, Dad's dead. He ain't coming back. As Albus Dumbledore says in the 4th Harry Potter book, no spell can reawaken the dead. Okay, what else?
His mom's fairly absent in his life.
Yeah, his mom's absent. She's running off with Jorge or whatever his name is off to Madrid and stuff. Okay, what else? Actually, we're going to see that part today. What else? He's screwed up royally, right? He's left his London and gone to the un-London, so to speak. A different kind of London. How did he do that? By, out of anger, striking and hitting that dragon's head off the side of the Natural History Museum. So a series of things has happened, and where we last left off, they were talking with the, not centaurs, sphinxes. And the sphinxes said, he needed to go see, essentially one of the sphinxes said, he needed to go see the dark shaveling. George looks at Edie, she's like, Gunnar doesn't know what a shaveling, something that is shaved off. No idea. So the gunner says, I know somebody who will have that answer. We need to go see Dictionary. Okay? Dictionary is a real person. Samuel Johnson wrote a dictionary in 1755 called A Dictionary of the English Language. Real inventive title there. It's the dictionary upon which all subsequent dictionaries are based. That is, he comes up with the methodology for writing a real dictionary. Okay? So if you've ever used the Oxford English Dictionary, look it up online because it's available online. The model it follows is Samuel Johnson's dictionary. And in London, on a street called the Strand, which is a major street, it's the Strand and Fleet Street, etc., runs through central London, there is a big statue of Samuel Johnson just outside the Inns of Court, okay, or the Hall of Justice, an actual Hall of Justice which just stands across the street from it. So the gunner has the idea of, we need to go talk to Dictionary Johnson. And if we had more time, I would pull up a map and I don't know if I can pull up a map on this or not. I'll wake up, stupid thing. Projector on PC. Yes, take PC. Oh, that means I gotta go through all this nonsense. Or maybe not. Start typing in London. London has fallen. I can tell this is being used for a lot of good scholarly purposes. Screen. Wake up. And get rid of this. And zoom. Move over. Zoom. Move over. Zoom. So, let me see if I can zoom in one more time. Yeah, that works. So, where the story begins is right here. This is the Science Museum, okay? So, can you see? Where do they go? Yeah, right here. Exhibition Road is running this way. So it starts here. George runs down here, okay? Here are Kensington Gardens. This is Hyde Park. Hyde Park is actually fairly large, okay? He runs around to right up in Winter Wonderland. Anyways, I'm sorry. He runs right up into this area, okay, which is where the Artillery Memorial is, all right? And then they leave from here. They go into the car park under here, and they've got to make their way over to, move that for a second. They've got to make their way over to where Samuel Johnson is. Samuel Johnson is going to be right over around here. Okay, this is Fleet Street, and then it becomes the Strand here. This is what's called Aldwych, right there. Okay, and there's a little, you can just barely see it. Let me zoom in one more time. And again. Right here, let's see, is it this one or is it? No, it's this one. Right here, you've got a church, okay, that's actually right in the middle of that. And out in front of the church is this statue of Samuel Johnson. Okay, now bear in mind, let me go back to where we were. So that's all the way there. He's going to go from all the way over here, okay, to that location. Now, it looks like, man, that's a long distance, right? It's not. From here to here is maybe a mile and a half. See, London is a tremendously compact city, okay? So he's got to go from there to talk with Dictionary Johnson. Then he's going to go from talking with Dictionary Johnson to other places. So I'm just going to leave that up for now. So pick up with the chapter, A Man Called Dictionary. See, I just wasted essentially 9 minutes. And I want to, a couple pages in, page 115. Edie's following along, and George is thinking about Edie. She might be able to see the unbelievable things he saw, but there was no inch of give in her. In other words, she sees the exact same stuff now that George sees. What does he mean? There's no inch of give in her. Edie's what?
Stubborn.
Louder?
Stubborn.
Stubborn? Okay. What else?
Angry.
Okay. What else? What do you become if you are stubby and angry? I almost did it again. Stubborn and angry.
Impetuous.
Okay. Possibly. Hard as rock, man. You don't give. This is Edie. Okay? We find out in the subsequent books why she is this way. I mean, we know a little bit of it now, but not all of it. She might be able to see the unbelievable things he saw, but there was no inch of giving her. He tried to talk to her, and she started out by hitting him. Things have gotten worse from there. Much worse. He could still taste the bile in his mouth from his reaction to her glinting with the sphinxes. Nothing good had come from her yet, and he'd be a fool to expect anything from her. Least of all, a conversation. So what's he thinking? It's kind of like back at the very first sentence. You know, he no longer wonders why he wants to belong. But what else? Just leave me alone. Okay? George doesn't want her there. Who else doesn't want her there? Obviously. The gunner. Why not?
Because she's a glint.
What happens if she touches the gunner?
She sees basically his life.
Okay. Which, I mean, he's a statue. Okay, so what's his life? Or in the ground, becoming molten. No, she sees his life of what he portrays. In other words, she experiences life on the Western Front, World War I. Bombs galore, okay, etc. So they keep going on. When they come to this, wherever it went, when they come to this spot, okay, Temple Church, which is what it is, when they come to Temple Church, they see a couple of statues of essentially World War II soldiers out in front. Why? Because the Temple Church is the RAF church. It is a church dedicated to the Royal Air Force. Okay? But out on the front side of the church is the statue of Dictionary Johnson. Okay? And they talk a little bit as they go past the church, page 117. She and George are talking. George looks at her, and she says, "Oh, I thought you got the vibe." He looked at her. She looked disappointed. "What vibe?" "Don't know. But there's a lot of death there." George realized something else about Edie, page 117 at the bottom. Nothing she said ever made anything better. He shivered and followed the gunner around the corner of the church. Gunner, a lot of death everywhere. This is London. A lot of life, a lot of death, a lot of everything. Okay? What's he mean? Well, you live in a city of 10 million souls, guess what happens? Some of those souls get snuffed out every night. We don't even have to talk about a city of 10 million souls. We can just talk about Chicago. Chicago just the other day passed their 600th homicide this year. Okay? 600. The same day, the same weekend. What was it, 2 weekends ago now? That all the people were killed in Sunderland Springs, Texas? Over 26 were shot in Chicago. We didn't hear that on the news. Why? They weren't all at church for one reason. Two, they didn't all die. Okay? So, they go off and they talk to Dictionary Johnson. And George says, page 120, "I'm confused." Confused or scared? Perhaps. Perhaps. "When I was young and fearful, a wise woman gave me this advice." This is Dictionary Johnson speaking. "Which I treasured and now pass on to you. Just as hope enlarges happiness, so fear aggravates calamity." A lot of big words there. What does he mean? Well, what did, get the right one, Franklin Roosevelt famously say in one of his fireside chats at the beginning of the Depression?
Fear of the fear itself.
only thing we have to fear is fear itself. In other words, fear increases what? Fear. So if you stop fearing something, you kind of learn to control it. George, in other words, whoosh. He's 12 years old, man. I mean, you make things worse by worrying about them. Notice, Edie gets it. Why does Edie get it?
Probably because it's happened to her before.
Okay.
Because she's been through a lot more.
Yeah. George just kind of woke up to this world, right? Hours ago. It's not even been a day. Edie has lived this world from birth. You know, you walk down the street and there goes a statue. Kind of, you know, turns your world upside down a little bit. Even after it happens again and again and again and again. Okay? So they keep talking. They ask Dr. Johnson about a shaveling. And he whips open his dictionary, which the statue has, and he says, a monk. Page 122. Well, the Sphinx said this was a dark shaveling. So I'm looking for a dark monk. A monk or an abbot, a friar, a dark friar. Well, it just so happens, where am I? Right? Which one is it? It's here. Right? No, it's not there. Which one is it? It's either right here. Can't remember. It's either right here or right here. Pretty sure it's this one. You have what's called the Blackfriar pub. Okay? And at the pub, it's shaped kind of like, the building's shaped kind of triangularly. I mean, it's kind of nestled between two roads. Okay? And at the Blackfriar pub, above the doorway, on like a pedestal that's above the door, is this big, giant brass Blackfriar. Okay? Not skin black. The robe he's wearing is black. Okay? Indicating what kind of monk, Dominican, I believe, what kind of monk he is. So, they realize they need to go see the Blackfriar. And George mentions something, and the gunner's like, and Dr. Johnson's the same way. So what's wrong with the Blackfriar? Nothing. Okay? So they don't know exactly what's up. So they get ready to go leave the Blackfriar. And let me, I can't see. How can I open another window in this? This one?
Yep.
I don't use all this stuff. I could do it on my Mac. What am I looking for? Temple bar. And, oh, there's a good one. See, if I were more prepared, I would bring you my pictures, which are a hell of a lot better than all these. So, this is the Temple Bar Dragon. Okay? At every entrance to what is called the City of London, which is essentially a 1 mile square area. This is the original City of London founded by the Romans. Okay? At every entrance, that is every road leading into the City of London, you've got a dragon that faces outward. Okay? It faces outside the city itself. Why? We're going to be told that dragon is there to protect the City of London. Okay? Some of them, like this, are really big and ornate. Others are, like knockoff things, like they were made in China. Okay? None of them were. They were all made in England. Okay? But this is a very, very big, ornate one. This thing is maybe 50 yards, from where Dr. Johnson stands. Dr. Johnson faces this direction. Okay? So they leave, and what happens? What does the Temple Bar Dragon do? Now, this is right, literally in the middle of the road. And Fleet Street is one of the busiest streets in London. So it's like an island in the middle of the road. It's called the Temple Bar Dragon because originally, around this was a big gate. Okay? With a gate on this side of the road going this way and a gate on this side of the road going this way. For when the road had carriages and wagons and stuff on it. Okay? That gate, what's called Temple Bar, is now gone. It's a few hundred yards away. It was piece by piece taken apart and moved. It's over by St. Paul's Cathedral now. Okay? So you can go to the actual Temple Bar, walk through it, etc., but it's just not here anymore. Some of these places, some of these bars, so to speak, gate-like things, are still around London. There's not many of them left. Okay? So they make their way out, and you get page 130. They see the dragon, they see the fangs, they see the smoke, and why do you keep doing this? And George is frozen. He can't move. Edie's like, come on, George. He's like, Gunner tries to get him to move. He can't. Okay? Gunner says, don't look in his eyes. Don't look. And the dragon strikes. 131. The flame hit the street in a twisting spiral of wildfire, ropes of red and orange and purple and yellow. Blaze twining together before slapping into the ground with the massive controlled force of water from a fire hose. The flames spread wide across the street, rushed toward them like a building wave. Now what else is going on in George's mind? There's cars going past. Right? But they're not seeing any of this. There wasn't enough cape because the gunner jumps in front of George, puts his cape around. Now what's the cape made out of? Bronze. Ought to help stop fire. But there's not enough cape to block out the sight. And George couldn't tear his eyes away. Get down. George can't move. Couldn't even shut his eyes. He knew he was a heartbeat away from ignition and conflagration, but he doesn't blink. He felt the heat hit his eyeballs and dry them out in an instant. Then he blinks reflexively, and when his eyes open, he sees the flames, as if they'd hit an invisible wall 10 yards in front of him. The gunner looks at George's face, then he looks at Edie, and there's flames about 10 yards ahead of him, just like they're hitting an invisible wall. Bloody hell! Okay? Edie, what is it? Because what happens to these flames? The flames hit where Temple Bar had been. It's blocking them, even though it physically is no longer there. And the gunner says, Temple Bar. What's that? One of the old gates to the city. Okay? Skipping a bit. The dragon gets past Temple Bar, and 134, the gunner shoots him. Multiple times. What happens? Top of 135. 3 more bullets splashed across the dragon's front with as much effect as paintballs on a tank. Little revolver bullets are not going to stop a dragon. The dragon looks down at the molten lead hissing across its chest, looks at the gunner for the first time and spits flame. It's like, how dare you even think of, The gunner spins, tries to grab George and Edie, but instead his sweeping fingertips graze George, scoops up Edie, and the flame hits him, sends him spinning across the street. So the gunner and Edie are now, what? Safe. George? He can't move. He's a goner. And he's thinking, ooh, I don't think this is good. 136. The dragon wasn't ignoring George. Notice, by the way, what Fletcher is doing there. If you've ever heard of St. George and the Dragon, Okay? St. George is the patron saint of England, by the way. And he slays a dragon. But the dragon's not ignoring George. It's watching him. George still can't move his legs. He had to shade his eyes to see the dragon. This is 136. But when he did, he was sure it looked different. Still angry because that's the way dragons are made, right? Have you ever seen a loving dragon? A dragon like a kitten, just purring? No, not really. He didn't know what it meant because the dragon's looking at him and it raises an eyebrow. Think Spock, like, this is interesting. George thinks, probably just trying to decide how to cook me. But there it was again, the unwanted bit of himself, the black, bily, treacle taste in his mouth, the prickling behind his eyes, the dark cable that seemed to twist through him, the thing he didn't think about, the thing he usually forgot was inside him, the thing he didn't understand, the thing that made him angry. What? Notice, something inside essentially says to George to metaphorically flip off this dragon. Now the dragon's eyebrow is definitely raised. What are you waiting for? Get it over with. The dragon cocks his head like a dog that you whistle to. The dog will go, huh? And instead, what does it do? It spits fire into one of its claws and then does this. So it's molding fire in its claws. Breathes again. George breathes again. He's thinking, maybe I'm going to live. And the dragon cocks its arm. Okay. They're not very long. T-Rex kind of. Cocks its arm. And does what? Hurls the ball of wildfire straight at George. And then time goes slow. Or George thinks maybe it's sped up. He saw the bolt of flame spinning toward him in a long arc. He knew from the rooted feeling of his feet he was never going to be able to dodge it. For a reason that had nothing to do with logic or sense, but everything to do with a lifetime of being the last boy picked for football and always being the goalie. What's that mean? Last boy picked for the team.
Not very athletic.
Not the most athletic. What else?
Not very well liked.
Not liked. He bunched his hands into fists and throwing his shoulders one way, what does he do? The ball comes, throws his shoulders one way. He's going to punch that thing. He hit it a glancing blow. Felt the hiss of fire as it made contact, moment of searing heat, and then it spun away. And what does the dragon do? The dragon roars, slashes a claw toward the ball, makes it spin faster, and it curves. Comes behind George and back at him like a boomerang. But it doesn't come at him. George hits it, notice. Changes its directory. And the dragon continues that change of directory to make the ball do what? So George is caught now in a tornado of fire. And where it leaked flame from where George had hit it, the flame stood in the air and stayed, so that he found himself at the center of a rising cone of fire. And now he can't see anything else. Okay? Edie and the gunner, meanwhile, are on the other side. And she's asking the gunner, page 139, can you save him? Gunner says yes, but he doesn't sound convinced because he's hurt. Okay? We're going to skip a bunch. Go back to George, page 142. He's still inside the tornado of flame, but like being inside a tornado or a hurricane, he can look up and see the sky. And he sees an airplane just flying over London. Blinking. Normal. And now he's angry again. He looks at the dragon and says, "You're not real." That's real. The plane is real. It's real. And science is real. and jet engines and crappy food and pepper and salt in little packets and seatbelts and bad movies with the cool bits taken out, meaning the dirty stuff, and boiled hard candy when you land and ears popping. Those are all real. You are not real. Why? Because what did the gunner say? The mind says, this can't be real. The dragon's eyes change, and it roars something. And George hears something that sounds like, real. What? Not real! So shouts George, and spits, and the spit sizzles and instantly evaporates. He holds up his hand to ward off the heat, and the dragon reaches out over the flame, and George suddenly feels pain. Which hand did he reach out? The one he used to knock off the dragon's head. Was the dragon's head like Junior? This one's son? But it didn't feel like when he'd hit the head off the tiny dragon at the Natural History Museum was suddenly happening. Only 1,000 times more intensely. Remember, he hits that stone, but he doesn't feel anything. Now, it's like the pain he expected, but 1,000 times worse. And he does this. Bottom of 143. And where he had felt fear and anger, he felt more sadness than he knew there had ever been in his life. And his heart slowed and shriveled under the world-crushing weight of it. Why? Why does he feel such sadness? He senses the dragon stepping over him, and then the last thing he sees, before his brain shuts off, was the darkness that burst through the wall of fire in the shrinking center of his vision. And all he can remember is the darkness wore a tin hat. Okay? He comes to, there's the gunner, and the gunner shoots him again. And what does the dragon leave on George's hand? A mark. George is thinking his hand is maimed. Okay? Page 151, we see the mark. Edie. Well, that's not good. Famous, last words, so to speak. They still haven't gone where?
The Blackfriars.
They still haven't gone to the Blackfriars. What's George thinking at this point?
I want to go home.
Where's the gunner?
Gone.
Gone. Gunner's got to get back to his plinth, right? Before midnight? If he doesn't, he's a gunner. Okay? So George is like, I'm done. Got to go back home. She goes, you can't, George. You can't pretend this just isn't happening, page 152. You have to go to you go to the Blackfriar. I'm going home. George is thinking, if I go home, I go to bed, I wake up tomorrow, it'll all be a bad dream. Well, what happens when he goes home? To skip a bunch.
He falls asleep, and then the gargoyle and the walkers stalk him.
Okay. He gets home. Mom's not there. He listens to the machine. He hears her voice. He calls her. What's going on where she is? Page 166 and 165 before that. It's like a party. He presumed the thriller was the audition, not Madrid. She's in Madrid. Gee, are you okay? Tried to call. You get my messages, darling? Phone went a little bit muffled. Why? She puts her hand over it. Stop it, it's my son. Stop it, stop. Giggles throatily. She and whoever Miguel are having a good time. Meanwhile, George is facing hell. He says, yeah, I'm fine. Notice, he wants to tell her everything, but he doesn't tell her anything. It didn't matter, page 167, what he wanted. She couldn't do any of those things. Any of what things? She couldn't make it all make sense. She couldn't make it better. She couldn't stop it hurting. He longed for her to be able to hear him. She couldn't hear him, even if George wanted her to. Why not?
Because she's just not there for him.
She's focused on herself. Okay? So, George gets uninvited guests. Edie shows up. And Edie says, we got to leave because others are showing up. The gargoyle shows up. The walker who shows up. Anybody remember what the walker's wearing?
Like coats.
Coat underneath?
John Deere hoodie.
He's got on a John Deere hoodie. Okay? And yet, what's happened to the lettering on this hoodie? This part isn't there anymore. Well, John D is a real person. He lived during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. And he was, according to himself, a magician. I've seen his manuscripts at Oxford University Library. At the Bodleian Library at Oxford. They had an exhibit a couple of years ago when I was teaching over there, and they had John Dee's and other magical and alchemical manuscripts out, which are pretty dadgum cool to look at. I mean, all kinds of weird stuff. Okay? So, 176-77. He asked Edie, where are we going? She said, oh, it's we now, is it? Yeah. And why's that? Because you came and found me again. In other words, you saved me. Saved me. Did I? Yeah, you did. Well, I guess that's a thank you then, is it? Guess so. Notice he doesn't say thank you, but, the point gets across. Where's the gunner? 179. Now you ask, where is he? Edie, what's wrong with you? He saved you. He jumped on the dragon even though he was, even though he was badly hurt. And he saved you, probably saved us both. He told me what to do and how to get you to the friar. And you know why? Because he was pretty sure the dragon would kill him. But he jumped in and saved you anyway. And you just turned your back and ran. And only now bother to ask about him. How selfish is that? In other words, kind of like mother, like son? He can't be dead. How would you know? You were too busy hailing taxis. George, he was having trouble walking before he jumped on the back of the dragon. He didn't think he'd be all right. And I think he knew what he was doing. You get that, George? He was sacrificing himself to save us. But I didn't know. I don't want to hear what you didn't. Save your breath, this is 180, and figure out what it is you're going to sacrifice if we ever find this Stoneheart thing. What? Notice, she's remembering what the Sphinx said. You've got to do what? Your remedy lies in the Stoneheart, and the Stoneheart shall be your relief. You must find the Stoneheart, and then you must make sacrifices and amends for that. Or did you forget? No. If I'm such a pain, why'd you come back? Because he told me to look after you. He actually said we had to look after each other, but you're as much use as a dolphin on a bicycle. She turns, walks on, and we're told, 181. The worst part of thinking about the gunner and what he had done was that he hadn't done the one thing George knew people did to each other. What's the one thing George knows people do to each other?
Let each other down.
They let them down. His father let him down. How?
By dying.
Yeah. I mean, divorce, okay, but he died. His mother lets him down all the time. His teacher let him down. But the gunner doesn't. He hadn't let George down. George, on the other hand, had let him down. Grief and guilt are a nasty combination. And the more he absorbed them, the sadder and more exposed he felt out here alone in the dark street with the black water to his right, pulling at him. So where are they going? Now, go back to over here. they're going to make their way. I don't remember where George lived, but they're going to make their way along the north bank of the Thames, okay, to come to the Blackfriars, okay? And they're not going to walk across along this sidewalk here, which is called the embankment. They're not going to walk along that. They're going to go down the embankment to the actual sand that the River Thames washes up on. The Thames is a tidal river, rises and falls with the tide. So they got to be careful, because when it's high tide, there is no sand. I mean, when it's high tide, it rises by a good 10, 20 feet. Gets really deep, okay? Even when it's not high tide, it's still deep, but you can still go out on the sand. So, 182-83. The gunner makes his way to Dictionary Johnson. And Dictionary says, don't see that every day. You think he's done the dragon? The gunner asks. Most certainly not. It's not his nature to be done. It is his nature to guard. And as with any guard, he will not long leave his post. Okay? How do you know? That's how he was made. Well, what a maker meant, the maid must mind, right? That is, what a maker intended in something, the thing must pay attention to. So I've heard it said, I feel it in my bones. Got bones, have you? He said, feel like I have bones. So, where does that take you? Where does your path take you? Dictionary Johnson asks him. The long path? Got no read on that. The long path, what's he mean?
His life.
Yeah, what's my ultimate destiny? What am I made for? Don't know. But tonight, I got to get back on my stone. And if I'm not, I'll never move again. Better start. It's only a couple miles. Gonna feel a long slog. Children? And the children, gunner? Dictionary asks. What must be, must be. In other words, I can't. They're out of my hands. Children are on their own. Not if you send a pigeon. What? Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right. And he does what? Well, because he served in the trenches, he has a little notepad. And he pulls out a little notepad, a little piece of paper. And he sends a message, because Dictionary Johnson, being a statue, naturally has what all around him?
Pigeon.
Pigeons. Okay? And so he pulls out a note and he writes, all the jaggers. Okay, what has he already told us? There's lots of statuary throughout London made by this same guy. So he notifies all the jaggers. And then he extends that. All the soldiers. Because there's statues of soldiers not made by Jagger. Watch out for gargoyles. He tells that to the pigeon. You're a messenger, not a tea time snack. Okay? So the message is, take this to all the soldiers and everything done by Jagger. It'll not be just Jagger's, page 185, and Soldier Spitz keeping an eye out for the children, gunner. You have my word. So, Dr. Johnson's going to spread word also. I'm going to skip a bunch. They make their way along the river, and what happens as they make their way?
Edie falls into a hole.
And she glints. She touches something that makes her glint. Okay? What does she see? These are real, by the way. The frost fair that she experiences when the River Thames froze solid, and they would bring tents and buildings out on the river and have fairs. Okay? Happened during what's called the Maunder Minimum, solar minimum, where there were very few sunspots on the sun for a rough period of about 200, 250 years during a period called the Little Ice Age. from about 1650, 1675 to the early 19th century, about 1820. The River Thames somewhat regularly froze solid during that period. This is an amazingly fast-moving body of water. For it to freeze solid, it's got to get really cold. Okay? So she experiences this, and what does she see?
An elephant.
She sees an elephant. She sees the walker. She sees a little girl get drowned. So she comes back, and we get chapter 25. George in charge. Okay, there it is. And we're told, page 211, something had happened. One thing had changed. This is the bottom of 210. But since he decided to take the lead, this is when she disappeared, and he thought he was alone again. But since he decided to take the lead, he actually felt less out of control. He didn't expect Edie would accept he was leading anything, but for the moment he was. It felt good. He was less panicked because he had someone else to think about, rather than just worrying about himself. There it is. What causes George to feel less panic? What causes George to feel in control? To not be thinking about himself. To be thinking about somebody else. Okay? All the rest of his life, he's apparently been thinking about what? Himself, his loss, his pain, his sorrow. Okay? So, before they make it to the Blackfriar, they go underground. Why? What's George think? And it's not underground like they go in a cave. They go in what in England is called a subway. Here we would call it like a tunnel. It's a walkway that goes underneath the road. Okay? We would call the subway like what you take in New York or something. That they call the tube. What's the danger?
The earth thing.
The earth thing.
Yeah.
Okay? Which starts to get them, and they get away from it. I'm going to skip a bunch. Go on to 27, the dark shaveling. They're standing there outside the Blackfriars. Yeah, there it is. You're standing there outside Blackfriar and talking. They're wet because they've been in the water. There's the Blackfriar standing up on top. They're talking. They look at the clock, and the clock says 5 to 7. Can't be later. Can't be. It's got to be later. And the Blackfriar replies. It's always 5 to 7 here, young man. Page 227. Always such a convivial, promising time. 5 to 7. The day's work done, the evening spread before you like a banquet to pick and choose. What's the Blackfriar think he's doing?
Welcoming them.
No, he's talking to himself. Because he doesn't know they can hear him. That's why he says, when Edie says, conversation is what we want. You heard me? George, yeah. Warmth would be nice too. You both heard me. We're cold and wet. A little bit jiggered. He's not used to this. Okay? So they go inside. Now, a Blackfriar, what is a friar?
A monk.
A monk. What's a monk? A religious person. Man of God. Right? Holy. Okay, a religious person is supposed to what? Roman Catholic priest, pedophilia scandal and all that. A priest is supposed to help you, supposed to be good, supposed to be someone you can trust, etc. Okay? So they asked for his help. 240. Actually, I think I'm going to skip. I'm not going to do the evaluation today. We'll do it Tuesday. Why should I help you? Because you're one of the good guys, says George. How does he know that? Because he's a monk. The Blackfriar. Am I? I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware of being a guy at all. Because a guy is something you burn on bonfire night. That is, a dummy. A figure made out of sticks and twigs. Bonfire night, November 5th. Remember the 5th of November is the phrase. Why? Because on November 5th, 1607, Guy Fawkes and his gang of conspirators tried to blow up Parliament. When all of Parliament and King James was there. Guy Fawkes was Catholic. This was an attempt, it was assumed by the Catholic Church to destroy the government so that a Catholic could be re-put in power. And so now every year, the 5th of November, you have bonfire night in England. They still celebrate this, okay? It's only, in fact, been recently where the laws have been changed to where a Catholic can become king. Like recently within your lifetimes. Okay? So, who told you I was a good guy? You're a monk, Edie says. And monks help, do they? Well, monks are on the side of good. He says, let me tell you what I am. I am what I seem, no more or less. I'm a fat monk and a merry innkeeper. The halest, that is healthiest, of fellows well met, and the watcher who stands at the road's fork. Okay? Here and here. I provide mirth and happiness, warmth and cheer, absolution for sins past, present, and even for a fee future. He's talking about the medieval practice of what are called indulgences, where Sam comes to me, I'm a priest, and she says, I'm planning on robbing this bank tomorrow at noon. Can I get an indulgence so that I'll be automatically forgiven for that if I die in the process? And I'd say, bank robbery. Yeah, 30 quid. Jonathan comes to me and says, I'm planning on raping somebody Tuesday next week.
Just so you guys know, I don't.
Can I get off on, not get off on that, but can I get time off purgatory on that? And I'd say, yeah, it's about 100 quid. That's a bad one. Okay? He says, in short, I can soothe your needs and ease your passage through this vale of tears. The Vale of Tears refers to an old song written by Gregory the Great, Pope of Rome, in the 6th century. Salve Regina, where the prayer is to Mary. Save us, O Queen. And you have a line about who are wandering in this vale of tears. I am a helpmeet to the needy and a bringer of quietus. Quietus? Anybody know what that is? Death. Okay? Murderer? Assassin? Okay? What's a quietus? It's a release, a discharge from the cares of life, a payment in full as of a duty or a debt. He means there absolution. That is, on your last moment, in your last breath, he says, I can relieve you of your debts. Not physical, spiritual. Okay? So, they tell him about what happens when they went in the underground. And he says, whoa, stop. The walls grew hands, tentacles, yeah. And a mouth-like thing came off on a stalk. And this really happened. Both of you, yes. He looks at the other carvings and such around him. None of them do anything. He says, what were they made of? Earth, mud, clay, gravel. And how did you escape its clutches? George, I hit it. Notice George's kind of usual reaction to things. Punch it, man. And everybody says violence doesn't solve any problems. does for George. You hit it and they stopped. He said, no, come on. You're making this up. This came from somebody else. Tell me the truth now. And he sees the mark on George's hand. Where'd you get that? What, that mark? 245? That maker's mark? Yes, the bourbon. That's what maker's mark, From a dragon. Just like, I was just a dragon did it. A dragon slashed me, Temple Bar. It's not a dragon mark. It is. It's not. It's a maker's mark. And you are no manner of thing to be bearing it. Okay? I don't know what a maker's mark is. Anybody know what a maker's mark is?
Alcohol?
Okay, that's one kind. What is maker's mark bourbon's mark? What is the thing that indicates it's their brand? It's the M in the red wax. It's also the red wax seal on the top of the bottle. Okay? A maker's mark is a mark that a maker puts on something to indicate, I made this. Several of you have them on right now. Any one of you that is wearing a pair of Nikes, it's the swoosh. We call that a trademark. Okay? You go to England, you go to any place in Europe that has old buildings, walk around a castle. This is what I usually do when I take my Harry Potter students. They'll listen to the guide, and then I'll walk around kind of with them and say, now, look down low on these massive columns and see if you can find a maker's mark. And they'll walk around, and you'll see something. Sometimes it'll look like this. Yeah, I know. It's kind of like I'm channeling my inner Harry Potter. Like the Deathly Hallows. Sometimes it'll be something like just that. Or maybe it'll be an initial, okay, like a monograph.
I was just going to say, I actually have the Deathly Hallows tattoo on my back.
Okay. I had a student several years ago who had a Hedwig snowy owl, big long thing with a long quote from Harry Potter right here. Started on her back and came all the way around and down to about here. Okay. So, George is like, it's just a scar. She says, yeah, but it's got a bit of a shape. Of course it's a shape. No, shape. It's a mint shape. That is, if it's a mint shape, it's not an accident. If it's a mint shape, then what does it?
It's a symbol.
It means something. Okay? So, 249, dead in the water. We see the gunner. And where has he gone? He's made his way from Dictionary Johnson from over here, he's made his way all the way down the strand, and he's now in here. He falls in the pond at St. James Park. Okay? He's got to get from here, cross here, or through Green Park, up to over here. So he's gone about halfway. How does he end up in the pond at the park?
His body gives up.
Face down. Okay? Dead in the water. 253, chapter 31, they meet Little Tragedy. Little Tragedy is a cherub carving on the inside of the pub. Last time I was there 2 years ago, a friend and I were there. I was teaching my Harry Potter course. He was helping me teach it. We went in Blackfriars because we both read the books and stuff. Went in Blackfriars, but it was so crowded. We couldn't get into the back alcove area where this is because I am determined that it's there, okay, to see what it actually looks like. So they keep talking to Little Tragedy. He knows immediately what Edie is. And he kind of says, well, I'm not sure that you can trust old Black. Bottom of 259. Trust old Black? Of course you can trust him. You can trust him for just about anything. Just as long as you trust him never to be what he seems. seems to be helpful, seems to be full of mirth, seems to be... So if you trust that he's not those things, Black comes back, and she sees the mirror, and she looks again at the mirrors, and the Blackfriar asks them, do you have anything to confess? Anything to confess? And they're like, well, you know, we stole some food, but we were hungry, and some drinks, but nothing really other than that. 265. Maybe you should tell me why you came, how you came here, and what the gunner thinks I can help you with. So they tell him about what the Sphinx said. And then about the dragon, page 269. He thinks that's kind of humorous. The dragon and George and the dragon, seems almost perfect. They don't understand. Let me see your hand again, George. He says it hurts. Aches now. And that was the hand you lashed out with? That's the hand you hit the carving? Yes. And the carving, where's the broken carving now? Broke. But where is it? Why? Because where is it? It's in George's pocket. Why ask why? Notice when George asks why, what does the Blackfriar immediately assume?
That he's accusing him of something.
Okay, is it that? Or is it you know where it is, and you just don't want to tell me? Edie, because we don't know whether to trust you. That's why. Notice, Edie doesn't usually beat around the bush very much. I mean, she's pretty honest, straightforward. So he says, you've been talking to somebody, little tragedy. Okay. 271. The monk says, when George says, little tragedy is lying, well, of course he lies. You've heard of the father of lies. Who is that? Satan. Well, as you'd expect, he has plenty of children. And that little imp there, that's one of his byblows. You'll make your own choice who you trust, my friends. No coercion, no compunction. So what did the Sphinxes tell you? So they tell him. He says, okay. You have a day to repine and a day to repair. After that, page 273, stones you have offended will rise up and grind you and crush you, and your life and very soul will be winnowed to the four winds on the great flushing. In other words, from the time you knocked off that stone dragon head, you've got 24 hours, essentially, to make it right. Is that like 2 days? George asks. You know, day to repine, day to repair. He says, no, you've got 1 day to both be sorry for what you've done and to try and make amends. Those 24 hours will have begun when you broke the stone. You don't know when that was, do you? About 3:40. What time is it now? Sometime after 7, because they think the clock's wrong. So you must reach the stone heart within a day of your offense, bottom of 273. It's now already what? Nearly the low 12. It's almost midnight. So he's got not quite 16 hours to go. Okay. George, I don't even want to know about winnowing, do I? Edie asks. No, says the monk. But don't be downhearted. There's a way, there's a marked way. By making your sacrifice, can you be assured of an easy quietus? That is, make your sacrifice on the stone heart, and then you'll be able to leave. Any later, you don't do it, and you're guaranteed the hard way. What if he doesn't find it? Well, if he doesn't go to it at all, then the taints will undoubtedly catch him and make whatever the hard way is seem like a mercy by comparison. That is, George at least has got to try. He must find the stone heart. He cannot come to it empty-handed. He must bring what was broken, the dragon carving. Do you have it? I picked it up. Good. I left it in my mom's flat. Idiot. Okay. Well, what's the stone heart? No idea. The Blackfriars says. But then he says, bottom of 275, the way is always marked, and these are the marks of his way. He has to climb the winding stair. The winding stair will lead to the memory of the fire. Turn this off. Turn off. Pause. Cancel. Will lead to the memory of the fire. Where the memory of the fire is caged, he will catch a fire, and then caught fire will show him the path to the stone heart. Another riddle? No, map of words. Okay? So, before they leave, what does the Blackfriar tell George? Page 278. You're a maker, George. You have a maker's mark on your hand. Okay? You have used gifted hands, top of 278. Hands made to make things, to do what? To break things in anger. All things that have been made, statues, spits, taints, feel your power and the affront it has caused. Even things not yet made will reach out to you and crave the form you might give them. So, when he was in the underground, when he was in the subway, the dirt was reaching out to him so that George would do what?
Make something out of it.
Fashion it. Shape it.
Though it was tearing them apart, so that was kind of,
The ground was reaching out to me. The clay sensed your mark and the gift you carry. Everything seeks form in a universe designed to break things down. Well, that doesn't make sense. Okay? If you take it on its bald surface level, if the universe is, quote, designed to break things down, why would things seek form? If it's designed to break down, then wouldn't things, by their design, simply break down? Why would they seek form out of chaos? How do you know I'm a maker? How do you know you're not? You say your hand broke the carving at the museum. Same hands cut through the clay. Maybe you're the maker the Mark said. Maybe you're something else, George. How does George know he's a maker? When he's there being yelled at by Mr. Killingbeck, what's he doing with his hands?
he's using it to form something out of the plastic.
He's playing with that plasticine in his pocket. He's shaping it. He's forming it. He's not even aware of what he's doing. Okay? So they get ready to leave. And George is just thinking, man, when this is all over, I'm done. And Edie's like, page 284. It's not temporary for her. 285. He was a tourist, Edie thinks. George is a tourist in her world. Nice thing about being a tourist is what?
You get to leave.
You get to go home. I mean, I love teaching in London for 4 weeks. But I love even more sleeping in my own bed when I get home and not in that crappy dormitory bed, essentially. Or living out of a suitcase, essentially. She was here for the duration. Okay? The chapter titled, The Man of Many Parts. Okay? What is this man of many parts? It's called Gridman. I don't think I can pull it up because I don't know what it's actually called. I don't think it's called Gridman. It's a statue outside the British Library, okay? Which is kind of human, but really not. It's like human designed by Pablo Picasso. If you've ever seen of any Picasso's paintings, non-representational, like nude descending a staircase. What? How the hell do you get a nude out of that? Or a staircase even, you know? So that's what this thing is. Why is it a taint and not a spit? Because there's no humanity in this thing. And it's coming for George. Okay? But it captures Edie. And the Fusilier rescues them, tells them the gunner dictionary warned us, and tells George and Edie, you should leave. You don't want to be here when it gets back. Okay? And they go off and they make their way and they come to the chapter, The Impossible Door, where they meet the clocker. The Impossible Door is right about there. Actually, take that back. It's more right about there. It's a church, okay? And you got the regular door downstairs, and then there's a big clock on the side of the church sticking out like on an arm. There's a clock. And behind that to the side, there's a doorway. No balcony, just a doorway up there, okay? And so they meet the clocker, and we're told, bottom of 318, he says he's a tally man. One of the weirded, so to speak. That is, we find out in the next couple of books, he is somebody cursed to do what?
So keep time.
Yeah, essentially to keep time. Okay? So what happens while George and Edie are there with the clocker? George asks, what's happening to me? Bottom of 319. You found Un-London. Un-London? Place with spits, taints, etc. Not your London. One of many Londons. Well, the gunner's already told him that. Can I walk between the worlds? George asks. Is that what? No, you fell into an Un-London. You didn't walk. We're pushed. Something about you. Something about you. Are you cursed? George says, I'm cursed? I'm one of the weirded? No, marked. Why would I be cursed? Done bad things? Okay. Start at baddest thing, then work back. George, there isn't a baddest thing. I don't. What's the baddest thing?
He said something bad to his father.
And then his father died. George, I said something bad, page 321. Not likely cursed for bad language. George's like, I said shit. I couldn't believe he said that. Wasn't bad language. Okay? George leaves a cookie for Edie. And skip a bunch again. Go to 326. I said something bad to my dad. Most sons do. No, really bad. I was angry and I said stuff that was bad and a lie. What do we infer George said?
I hope you die.
I hate you, I hope you die. And then he does. Not really easy to take that one back, is it? You see, there were tears in his eyes, and I didn't say sorry or goodbye. I didn't say anything. He wiped the spit off his cheek. So George spat at him and said I didn't mean it. And I was just trying to hurt because I was hurting. And I swore I meant it, swore I would always mean it. He looked stranger than I ever saw him look. I thought he was going to ... And he left. He was going to what?
Hit him.
Hit him?
Break
I don't think that's it.
Cry.
In other words, George got him. Way to go, George. You stuck that knife in and turned it just right. Don't know why I'm telling you this, because you can. Everyone can, notice the pun, tell the time. Why? Because when he's with the clocker, it's kind of like he steps outside of time and he has time. He told the clocker about his father had driven off, never driven back. Why? Because someone else hadn't been looking and had driven into him the next day. Been killed instantly. Nothing left to say except a sorry that seemed as hollow and empty as a coffin. Now no one was there to hear it. Okay? So he talks to the clocker, and the clocker kind of helps George figure out the riddle. The fire of London. Okay? London was burned by a fire. In 1666, and right about there is where what's called the monument is. Okay, 204 steps to the top. Okay, the door at the bottom, this is the doors on the other side. The door at the bottom, you know, the steps are about this wide. By the time you get to the top of the monument, I'm not kidding, the steps are maybe 12 inches wide. Okay? So you want to get there before people start to come down from the top. Because if you are, you know, just before that platform, if you're like up here, then you've got to squeeze up against the side while they go past you. Okay? Because it gets very, very tight. People who have claustrophobia do not like going up in the monument. I love going up in the monument. Used to be able to, you could go up and you could see a lot. But now, as you can kind of see here and here, you're not seeing it, but over here now, there's no longer blue sky. There's a big old massive building here that's twice the height of the monument. Okay? So you can't see nearly as much of London as you used to could. So, at the monument, back up, 334. We're not going to finish. We'll get close. 334. Where are they? George and Edie.
Inside the clock.
Are they inside the clock? Well, they're inside the clock room, let's say. But where is that? It's inside a church. Okay? He talks about the Orthodoxes. Because the church is used by Russian Orthodox. They're actually Romanian Orthodox. And he talks about them chanting for their services. Okay? When we were there last summer, my wife and I walked in because we're Orthodox. And it was a major feast day. I don't remember what it was. Anyways, we went in, and George tells us. He says he's gone. She's like, who's gone? And he decides not to tell her about the clocker. Why? Bottom of 334. He didn't tell her all of what he'd said to the clocker because it didn't seem any of her business. Well, what did he say to the clocker?
Stuff about his dad.
That stuff about his dad. He'd done what to the clocker? Because he'd said it to someone, and somehow that was what mattered. He confessed. Where?
Inside a church.
In a church. And he'd said it to someone, therefore he doesn't need to say it to everybody. It's as long as somebody else hears it. Okay? So they go from there, they're not very far, and they make their way to the monument. And at the monument, they get attacked. She gives George her heartstone, her piece of glass. And George goes up, and what happens to Edie?
She gets, hand around her mouth.
She gets taken. Okay? Meanwhile, George is fighting the gargoyle. And what does he do to the gargoyle?
He pulls out the pipe.
He pulls out the spout. Okay? By pulling out the spout, what does he do to the gargoyle? Keep in mind, what have we been told by the Blackfriar George is?
A maker.
He's a maker. By pulling the spout out of the gargoyle, what has he just done?
Unmade it.
Does he unmake it? Does the gargoyle fall to pieces? A bunch of dust?
Changed its purpose.
He changes its purpose. Okay? It is now no longer designed to spit water off of a roof. How do we know? Because it can't. Okay? It can't. It won't work. That's not its form. any longer. So, the gunner shows up. He did make it back to his plinth by midnight. And
He's the one that grabbed Edie.
yeah, he's the one who grabbed it, and the Minotaur's going to come in a minute. George comes back, and he says, I'm trying to get as much done as I can. We've got 5 minutes. Page 373. He tells Edie, let me back up. He says to her, I owe you. No, you don't. Sure I do. Why are you still with me? Because you came back for me, without thinking, without that taint that had me by the head. Bottom 373. That's why I gave you the sea glass. George felt uneasy. He stopped smiling. He kicked the ground. Why? Oops. Edie, I didn't come back for you without thinking. I mean, I did in the end. But I did think about just running away first. She's like, what? I'm sorry. I wish I'd been braver. Without thinking about running away, more like him. And he points at the gunner. And Edie says, maybe it's braver to think about running away, but then stay away. And it's not just because of that. Maybe it's because I lost my temper when the Sphinxes gave me another question. If I'd asked about the stone art, you'd have got there quicker. Okay? So they keep talking, and she says, your dad was a maker, wasn't he? Right? He doesn't want to talk about his dad. And Edie says, I don't think winging him, page 375, quite does it. I mean, if it's the same bird, they're talking about the crow. If it's the same bird we saw blown to pieces last night, gunner, would be, you can't kill him any more than you can kill memory, which is what he is. He's what? If you know Norse mythology,
He's one of like Odin's ravens.
he's one of Odin's 2 ravens. Mugen and, sorry, I can't remember their names. He's got 2 ravens. One means memory, and I can't remember what the other means. George, what do you mean? Memory always finds a way to survive, even if there's no one left to do the remembering. It locks itself away in stones and waits for one of her sort to pull up and unlock it. Okay? And George then admits, sorry, I left your stone behind. Well, why did he leave the stone behind?
He was getting attacked.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of busy at the moment. But Edie, it's like when she finds that out, what happens to her?
She just shuts down.
She wilts. Okay? And the gunner says, you don't understand, son. George, well then add it to the pile. That is, I don't understand an awful lot. You left her heartstone behind. Stone heart? Heartstone? Her what? The sea glass, her heartstone. A glint's heartstone is essential to them. It's vital to what they are. But we're nearly there. We're here. Where are they? They're like across, okay, from the Heartstone of London. And I'll pull it up next week, okay, to show you what it looks like. You're here, she's there, but she's there, and she's without her Heartstone, and she's alone. So, George, you going to go take care of what it is you need to do? Because what happens if he does? He's gone. He's good. He's done, right? What happens to Edie?
She stays.
And George doesn't remember anything. Edie stays. She doesn't have her Heartstone. But George goes back to his pitiful life-sucking life, you know. Okay, we'll stop there. Try to have the first half of the next one read for next class.
Have a good weekend.
Expect a quiz.